Hello and welcome back to another Dead City review, and today we'll be reviewing episode 5 of Dead City, and this episode deals with the aftermath of episode 4. We have two big plots. So the first one of Maggie, Jenny and her little gang down in the sewers trying to escape, and Negan and Pearly trying to get off of the island but eventually come to an agreement to help each other. And there's also a small bit with the Croat and a bit more world building here and there. And it's a good episode. All three, or two and a little bit of extra things, are entertaining. There is no times where I'm like, okay, I really want them to jump over to the next plot. There is no times where I'm looking at my watch. The pacing is great. The writing is good. However, I do have to mention, and I will talk about it later, the writing is not as good as it has been in other episodes. This episode has a bit of issues with conveniences here and there where I'm like, okay, the writing's a bit lazy here, the writing's a bit lazy there. What really lets this episode down and stops from being a 10 out of 10 is just really small things. There's just lots of little things. Like, I personally was not a fan of most of the reveals in this episode. The first big reveal is we find out who the big traitor is and why everything went so badly in episode 4. I felt like that was super obvious, and they tried to play it off as like, ooh, it's a big moment in the sewers. No. However, later on, I do like how there's not this massive feeling of plot armor. Big scene happens, and I was worried like, oh, they're going to do it episode 4 again. Plot armor. No, but then they did the opposite, and I felt like, okay, now it feels like you're just trying to be like, there's no plot armor, and it felt like it was rushed. There was big character deaths in this episode, and I felt they were rushed and they could have been handled better. It was just like, bam, dead. And another real issue I had with the Maggie plot, which is very simple, it's just them trying to escape. And I spent the entire episode really waiting for the big Rat King reveal, because we saw the Rat King in the trailer. We're in the sewers. I'm like, oh, we're going to see the Rat King. So I was just waiting for it. And while we were slowly chugging along, we had this big reveal at the start of the episode. I didn't care. And then you have our characters stopping down, having a little conversation. And in the background you see, oh, Walker hands are moving. And it seems like the Walkers were only attacking our characters when the plot wanted it to. Like, Maggie is down there with her little group, talking, surrounded by dead walkers, or we thought dead walkers, and the walkers didn't bother attack until the plot was like, well, we need to kill off some characters. Walkers spring out of the woods. It just felt like that with the walkers. Like, I wasn't a fan of season 11 episode 1 where you had the sleeping walkers. No, come on, like, in earlier seasons, walkers are not alerted by sight and stuff like that. I know earlier this season they also had our characters walk through the dark so they didn't wake up the walkers. Walkers can smell humans. That's one thing that would attract them. If they can smell you, they will activate. That's why the guts tricks work. And then you have walkers here, which they can smell our characters. They don't care if they can hear them, but they only come out when it felt like it. It's just little things like that with the inconsistency of the walkers in this show. And it is such a small thing, but I just didn't like how we had a sudden walker attack. Moving on, we had the Rat King, and it looked great. It was really good. However, I thought it would be a bigger moment. Like, you have Maggie versus the Rat King, and it was just over so quickly. I don't know what I was expecting. Like, you have a veteran survivor against this monstrosity, and it played out way quicker than I would have liked it to, but I felt like if they did more of it, it would ruin it in a way. So it's kind of damned if you did, damned if you don't scenario. It was cool to see the Rat King. It was very entertaining on, like, maybe the 3 minutes I had of screen time. At most, it could have maybe been maybe a minute and a half. It's just the Rat King felt like it was not a real problem for Maggie. I felt like Maggie should have struggled more with this, like, Rat King. She was knocked over and she had about 4 walkers worth of weight on top of her, and that was fine. I felt like Maggie should have struggled a little more with the Rat King. Moving over to the Negan side, and I'm going to be honest, I really had no issues. Like, all my issues are connected to Maggie and her plot and the conveniences there. With Negan, we get more deep dive into Pearly's past. We find out he's a New Yorker. We find out about his brother. And it made me like Pearly more. I went off the end of episode 4, not really liking Pearly, and was like, I hoped he died in that episode. But I'm happy he's not, because we're getting an interesting side with Pearly, and now he's coming to this point where, like, maybe I shouldn't kill Negan. I'm actually really interested. They had some cool sets. We had a school. I felt like they could have done more. It's just them walking through the school. They find one walker, and you get an Easter egg to episode 1 of The Walking Dead with a Don't Open Den side door. The Negan plot is just character focused, and it really helps deep dive and flesh out Pearly and Negan. And I just like that little plot there. It's very enjoyable, and the best thing about it is it's all in the light. Dead City for me spends way too long with dark like shoots. I'm so happy we're having this plot with Negan, and it's all in the light. We get to see these sets, and we get to see Manhattan properly in the daytime. It's a very, very pretty show. It's just a shame a lot of the time I feel like they spend too much of it in darkness. We can't properly appreciate the sets and locations they're showing us. It is just, the cinematography is definitely better this episode than last episode. We have some cool like panoramic shots in this episode. And now let's move over to these two things I want to talk about, and these are definitely massive spoilers, so I left them to the end. The first thing is a little bit of the Croat, and it definitely makes me feel, there's a little scene of the Croat where he goes and meets this new woman in this big theatre, and they talk about Negan like he's a hero, and they talk about like they're about to go into the third act, and they need the hero on the stage to make the ending good. And it makes me think, maybe the Croat doesn't want Negan dead. What if the Croat wants to be allies with Negan and they need Negan? The Croat talks to this woman about the new Babylon Marshal, and they talk about how they're more or less worried that they're going to come and take what they built and try and rebuild the old world. And it makes me feel like maybe the Croat wants Negan to be the man that he was when he was the leader of the Saviors. That's the Negan they think he will still be, and that's the Negan they want. It really makes me think that maybe Negan is being used completely different. He's not there for revenge. The Croat doesn't want revenge. He wants to have Negan save him in a way. That's what I think is going to happen. And the big thing at the end of the Maggie plot is the big reveal, that the big plot twist that is set up for Maggie and Negan having this big fight in episode 6. And I'm definitely a bit worried about episode 6. It seems like episode 6 has to do a lot. Where this episode ends, they have one episode to tell a lot of the story of an episode, because the last episode seems like it's going to be Maggie versus Negan, because this episode has the big plot reveal, and even I guessed it. It was such an obvious plot reveal, and the writing treats it like this is big things. They tease it in episode 2. No, it isn't. It was so obvious. I said it would happen in my breakdown video for the trailer. Like, when I did that about the trailer, I was like, this is what I think Maggie's going to be doing, and it's exactly that. The Croat took Hershel and told Maggie to go find Negan and bring him to the city. That's it. We have the big reveal this episode where Jenny's like, you're a liar, they didn't steal your grain, they just want Negan. And I'm like, oh wow, yes, that is very obvious, and it's just convoluted, and it seems this big reveal, and I was sitting there looking at my screen like, that was obvious. That's not a big reveal. You're not as clever as you thought you were. And it seems like they're just being like, we want Maggie and Negan to fight. How are we going to do that? Have Maggie betray Negan, which was very obvious. And it seems like they could have gone a better way. Why would the Croat make this very convoluted way to get Maggie to go get Negan to Dead City, when if he can get off the island, why not just go find Negan? Because if Maggie easily found Negan, why would the Croat not just go out and do the same thing? Or take people with Maggie, so when Maggie finds him, you have the Croat's men there. It's just this massive hole in the Croat's plan to get Negan to the city, is to use Maggie. I was not a fan of it. It treats it like this big reveal, and I was like, I predicted this weeks ago. It is such an obvious thing, and I was really hoping they would do something different to have Maggie and Negan be at each other's throats. I just feel very underwhelmed by the reveal, and by the fact that episode 6 seems like it's just going to be a Maggie versus Negan episode, only for the end of the episode from the team back up. And then you have episode 6 be pointless, because you can go from episode 5 to season 2 episode 1, and you'd be in the same position with them together as a team. It seems like next episode could be slightly fillery in the overall story. It might have this big action-packed moment, but I am not as excited for the next episode as I was excited for this one. Let's move on to my one sentence / one word overall review. And I have to say this is an enjoyable episode and give it a 6 out of 10. It is well paced, it looks great some of the time, and it was enjoyable. It's just the only things that let it down are the lazy writing at parts and the writing not being as good as it has been in previous episode. This is still way better than some episodes in the final season of The Walking Dead and all of Fear so far. It's still way better than that. It's just I was expecting a bit more from how good this season has been. To have this episode let me down with some very obvious plot points and them treating it like these are these big moments where I'm like, nah fam, that was very obvious. But please tell me down below, what did you think about Dead City episode 5? Are you shocked about the plot twist, or you like me and saw it coming a mile away and was just like, well, what's the point? I'll let you know all your thoughts and opinions about The Walking Dead Dead City in the comments. But this is it for me today. So goodbye, peace out, and I'll see you in my next video.